What's your creepiest glitch in the Matrix or unexplainable thing that's ever happened to you? Weird but happy. About 5 years ago in November we lost our family dog to cancer. She was the dog my children grew up with, loved by all. At the next Christmas, at the end of the day of gifts, food and family, as I was picking up, I found a tiny pewter dog figurine sitting on the mantle. I asked everyone who had been at the house that day if they left it. No one had. Okay. Weird. But took it as a good omen. When my eldest went back to college at the end of that Christmas break, he asked if he could take the little figurine to remember his dog. Of course. I said yes. A week or two later, picking up around the house, there was the figurine again. I called my son and said, "You forgot the dog figurine." He said, "No, I didn't. It's right in front of me on my desk." I had now found the second figurine. Exclamation mark. Again. No one claimed any knowledge of it. No idea how, but I still have the two of them tucked away on the shelf to this day. About a year ago me and my cousin visited Los Angeles. We were driving around using Google Maps, and after missing our third or fourth exit we swear we both heard it sigh loudly before it rerouted us. We freaked out and made sure our driving was on point the rest of the ride. The rest of the trip there, if we missed any of our exits or turns we always apologized to Google so hopefully she would know we were just morons and not assholes. Removed a painting from the wall during a late evening cleaning. Put it away and returned to the wall to see a never before seen painting on the same spot. Put a chill down my spine. This happened around 1991. It's the middle of the night. I'm standing in my sister's living room, and it must be a full moon. Because even though it's around 1 AM and the lights are off, I can see clearly. There's a mixing bowl with popcorn kernels in the bottom on the floor in front of the TV and some rental VHS in a pile nearby. I hear a noise and turn around to see my sister's normally very friendly Labrador retriever looking like Cujo. Fangs bared, snarling, hackles raised. Suddenly there's a bright flash of light and I wake up like I hit the bed from a great height. I think that was a weird dream. Eventually, I fall back to sleep and in the morning I call my sister, planning to tell her the story, but she preempts me by telling me about the weird thing that happened in the night. They woke up to the sound of the dog snarling at about 1 AM. Her husband thought there was a prowler in the house, got a gun, and went to find the dog. She was standing in the living room snarling at the middle of the room. He couldn't see anyone, so he flipped on the light. No one was there. The dog instantly stopped snarling and walked to her bed like nothing had happened. He checked the property and went back to bed. We talked a bit and I found out they watched some rental movies and of course we had popcorn. Why? My sister is a little woo-woo at times, so I decided not to tell her about my night. She lived about 450 miles away by the way. Edit. Punctuation. I would say that this was creepy, but it's definitely one of the most quaintly surreal things I've ever experienced. So, back in 2016, I was injured at work, and for about 6 months my life consisted of going to physical therapy and being confined to bed until I could walk again. With that in mind, I had a lot of time to read books. One of the books that I was reading was X-Heroes by Peter Clines. Now I don't know about anyone else, but when I read a book I like to cast the characters in my head, coming up with how they look. One of the minor characters in this book was named Elijah Ann, because I know someone named Elijah, and because the book is set in Los Angeles, where I live. The Elijah in the book became the Elijah that I knew in my imagination. But then, something strange started to happen. The Elijah in the book made specific references to movies like Aliens, a movie which the Elijah I know is a huge fan of. The Elijah in the book was a big fan of firearms, as the Elijah that I know is. Put into words, these details seem slim, but there was something so strange about the character in this book that I eventually reached out to the Elijah that I knew to ask about it. Turns out that Elijah knows the author, Peter Clines, who had put him in the book. What are the odds that I would choose to buy a random book with a story that takes place essentially on my street in Los Angeles and features someone I know in real life as a minor character? That blew my mind. and it's easily one of the most surreal experiences I've had. I died. I saw it. I lived it. Either it was another world with a version of me that died I saw, or I'm going crazy but I died. We had a pep rally in school, and after it was finished we had to go back to class. Well, my friend and I were not into that, so we wanted to across the street to Sonic. Across the school there is not heavy traffic, but if you don't pay attention you could get hit. Well, I remember walking with him, and he dropped something, so I went across the street first. I just saw a red Tahoe heading right for me, and I got hit. I remember everything. I remember gasping for air. I remember waking up and sleeping again. Then nothing. All of a sudden I was back in the stadium again, and the exact same words came out of the principal's mouth. My friend wanted to go get Sonic, but I was freaking out. Was asking him everything. I thought it had to be a dream. So I went with him, just to see what would happen. He dropped his stuff again and I waited. To my horror, that same red Tahoe showed up. I told him that I'm going back to school. I ain't dying again. I can still see the other version of me on that street just messed up. Not even moving. One day when I was about 8 I didn't go to school because I was sick. My friend was supposed to bring me homework etc. But he never came. My granddad came home from work and he told me that that friend was dead. I was devastated. That night I had a dream. I was with my friend at a playground next to our school and we were talking. Then he told me that he is safe and it didn't hurt when that car hit him. The next day my mother wanted to talk to me about that situation and she asked me if I wanted to know what happened. I told her that I know everything because my friend told me. She thought that my granddad told me, but he did not. He said that he did not wanted to tell me without her knowing it. That night I had a dream again, and I was talking to him again. We were playing and having fun, and he told me that he really had to go and we won't see each other ever again. The next day was his funeral, and I really haven't had a dream about him ever since. Might get buried but oh well. When I played baseball as a kid, they were handing out the trophies at the end of the season. They called out the names of the kids while we received our trophies. There happened to be a kid with the same name as me. We met after the ceremony because it was weird since our last name isn't a very common one. We had the same birthday and everything. We looked alike. Both our dads were named Derek and both of our sisters were named Lily. As a kid, I found it cool. As an adult, I find it cool and also disturbing. This summer I bought my girlfriend a last-minute birthday trip to go kayaking around the San Juan Islands off the Washington state coast. After a long drive and ferry trip, we found the tour group of about 20 people and were then shuffled into a shuttle van for a ride to the beach. Now, my girlfriend has a unique name similar to the name of a famous painter. Let's say it's Rebecca Warhol just for fun. It's not. She's a little ray of sunshine. And started chatting with the middle-aged woman sitting next to her on the shuttle as we waited to leave. The woman noted that she had always loved the name Rebecca, as it was her mother's name. They made pleasant small talk in the van until a tour guide passed around the sign-in sheet for all of us to fill out. That's when things got strange. My girlfriend wrote her full name on the sheet and passed it on to the woman, who immediately shouted "Oh my god," and started crying. After a few minutes of total confusion, she told us Rebecca Warhol was my mother's full name, and these islands were her favorite place in the world. She passed away this summer from cancer, and we've traveled hundreds of miles to spread her ashes here. We were stunned. I literally picked a random date, time, and tour company, and then we were split into the same group as this woman and my girlfriend was sitting right next to her on the shuttle. What the hell? She continued by saying, "My daughter told us that Nana Rebecca would be with us on this trip, and I didn't believe it until now. It was the most unbelievable coincidence we had ever experienced, and has totally convinced me that there's more to this world than we think." As my brother later said, the universe winked at us that day. I shared this a few years ago when this question was asked last time, and didn't really realize how glitchy in the matrix it was until people started commenting haha. In college, I took a hard news/soft news journalism class where one of the assignments was to write an obituary for one of my grandparents. The professor told us to write it on a deceased grandparent. But if all of your grandparents were still alive, we had to choose one. In my case, all of my grandparents were alive. I procrastinated actually doing the assignment until the night before it was due because it seemed like a morbid assignment, especially once all of my grandparents were still alive. Scramming for an easy grandparent to write about, I gave my mom a call and asked her for some basic biographical information about my maternal grandfather. As we were talking about my grandpa's career, my mom couldn't recall the name of one of the companies he worked at. She lectured me about waiting until the last minute to write the assignment because it was late, 10:30 p.m. my grandpa's time. However, she said she would give him a call to see if he was still awake and be able to answer that question once my assignment was due the following morning. When my mom called my grandpa, my grandma answered the phone in a panic. My grandma frantically explained that the paramedics had just arrived and were performing CPR on my grandpa because he had stopped breathing and lost consciousness. My mom was able to stay on the phone with my grandma until they took my grandpa to the hospital, where he was declared dead. In the time my mom and I had been talking on the phone about my grandpa's obituary, he was dying. His death was entirely unexpected at that. Although he was in his 80s, he was the healthiest of my grandparents at the time. We ended up using the obituary I wrote for that writing assignment as his actual obituary. Still freaks me out when I think about the timing. About 2 years ago, I went to collect my husband from the ferry after work. My husband got into the car, and as I was driving very slowly out of the car park, we both noticed two people standing a few meters in front of our car. It looked as though they were strangers, older looking professionals, both walking to their separate cars in different areas of the car park. The man was reaching into his side bag and the lady was further ahead than the man, with her head turned to the right. I know the exact positions they were in because they were completely frozen on the spot. My husband and I sat there watching the frozen strangers, not saying anything to each other, and then all of a sudden it was like someone pressed play and the two strangers just continued on like nothing had happened. My husband and I promised to each other that we would never forget how weird the experience was. I can't remember exactly how long they stayed frozen like that, but it was long enough to freak us both out. 1985. My ex-wife and I were sleeping. There was a small sliver of light coming in through the window from a street light, so the room and bed were dimly visible. Our black Pomeranian was at the end of the bed asleep. I dreamt that I woke up, reached down to pet him, and he turned into a glossy black bivalve / oyster thing which opened up to reveal rows of gleaming glass teeth. I woke up to my ex backpedaling up the bed over the pillows towards the wall. I asked, "What's wrong?" ? She said, "What is that shiny black clam thing with the teeth at the end of the bed?" ? "Where's the dog?" We had the same nightmare at the same time. This still gives me a chill. Every night I go to bed about 2 hours before my husband. I always wake up when he comes into the room. One night he was gaming with a friend, and it was hours later I heard him sneak into the room and crawl across the floor so he could pop up and scare me. I felt the floor kind of shake and felt him bump clumsily against the side of the bed in the dark. I held out my hand and asked him not to scare me. I was already scared enough and begged him to just take my hand and come to bed. I couldn't see anything in the room, but knew he was there and just waited for him to jump up so I could move on and go back to sleep. That's when I heard him talking to his friend in the other room. I was frozen. I know there's sleep paralysis or lucid dreaming or something that explains this, but I would have sworn on my son's life that someone had crawled across the floor and jostled the bed. Eventually I worked out of the fear enough to grab my phone and text my husband to come in and turn on the lights and check under the bed. But holy shit, it boggles me how real it felt. Eater, thank you for the silver. It's my first. Thank you to everyone who's confirmed sleep paralysis. Kind of comforting to have that as the answer. Maybe if it happens again, that knowledge will help. Also, it was likely inspired by watching Markiplier play Don't Open Your Eyes. Sleep with your doors shut. Kids, you'll thank me later. 3 scary games #36. I have a jade Buddhist necklace I bought in China about 10 years ago. It disappears for months at a time, only to reappear somewhere obvious like my desk, my dresser, in a drawer I use every day. I just say it goes on a trip and will come back eventually. A friend and I went to a buddy's house for a day party. Stayed up playing Halo 2 and hanging out. We all crash in the basement. Friend who came with me and I got up at the same time. Not like one after each other. We both got up at the same time after being asleep for a few hours and rushed to the bathroom. R was more athletic than me, probably still is, and beat me there. I ran upstairs, barely getting my head over the toilet before puking my guts out. R was doing the same thing in the basement. I was wearing a wooden cross my grandmother mailed me from Romania. I'm not religious, but I appreciated the gift as I had never met her at that point. Cross somehow became detached from the cord, fell on the tile, and broke into 2 pieces. So we both call our respective mothers and get picked up. By now it's like 3 to 4 am. Felt sick up until we left the house. Once I was in the car and a few blocks away. Felt perfectly fine. R reported the same thing to me that day over MSN Messenger. Felt perfectly fine after a few blocks. Got the pictures developed a few weeks later. There's a picture of us on the couch rocking some Halo and the whole room looks like it's filled with mist. Super spooky. I've been looking for the pic for a long time and I can't seem to find it anymore. But every few years my sister and I search my mom's photo albums for it. 2 things. Each was witnessed by at least one other person and both were while driving. Once at a stop sign in a neighborhood. All of these little sparkles started swirling around in midair roughly 3 to 4 feet off the ground out of nowhere. The group of them were roughly 2 foot wide by 3 to 4 foot tall. It lasted 3 to 5 seconds and then they were gone. No one was around, and when I asked my passenger if he saw it too he breathed a sigh of relief and said yes. We spoke about it a little more but there is no reasonable explanation. The second happened when myself and 3 friends were driving down an empty country road. Very straight stretch. A man on a bike appeared. Someone said to watch out for him, so not to hit him, and then he disappeared. Our minds were blown to say the least. Just poof and has gone. I've got several kids and night terrors are always a bit freaky. But once you know it's normal and what it's like, you kind of get used to it. But my middle child had something happen a couple years ago that didn't seem like it could be a night terror. He's almost 5 now and has been pretty advanced in academics for a while. Somehow learned how to read the names of numbers and colors and such, and I accidentally found out one day when I caught him reading what I had written. He came into my room very upset one night. Night terror. Except he was fully awake. I know they can seem like they're awake but they're not. But I had him doing math. 3 plus 2 is 5. Asking very high level questions about things. He seemed fully alert and aware. But he was seeing something my wife and I could not see. Something threatening and scary. The fire was going to get him. He shrieked ear-piercing screeches. Consistently turning away and back to the doorway into my master bath, where he saw this thing that was invisible to me. This happened for a few nights. 2. I could only reassure him that he was okay and nothing was there, and we would protect him. You're okay. You're okay. I'd tell him. He always darted down the hallway between his room and mine for a few days after this, reassuring himself by saying I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay as he ran. Poor thing. Freaked my wife and me out completely. I once clocked out of work at 6 PM, like I always did at the time, and began my hour-long train ride home. After I had found a seat, I went to sleep and woke up just before my station. From the station, it is a short bus journey, 10 to 15 minutes, to reach home. During the entire journey, I didn't use my phone and I don't wear a watch, so I didn't really notice the time anywhere. When I reached home, my family surprised me with "You're home early. Everything alright?" I look at the wall clock and it is about to be 6 PM. I was too shocked to understand what happened. Checked other watches, cell phones etc and the time is absolutely right. A few days later, the admin emailed us the timesheets for the month, times clocking in and out, and every single days for me was around the same 6 PM. So it certainly wasn't me having left work earlier. To this date, I haven't figured out how I gained between 60 to 90 minutes that day. Edit 1. Wow. Thank you for the pirate silver mateys. This is most popular comment ever. Gained an hour or so and some karma to go with it. Edit 2. The most common theory in comments seems to be the DST, and I have considered it before. The problem is that it should work for both time in and time out, and if I remember the time in was the same as always, and I didn't leave my home early for work. If I remember right, it also wasn't a Monday, which is when the clock reset effects come through at work despite the changes going in on Sunday. I was driving about 50 miles per hour and a car ran a stop sign on an on-ramp and pulled out right in front of me. I remember bracing for impact, and then I was about 300 yards down the highway and I saw the car at the ramp in my rear view, just about to pull out. After my little brother was murdered the next morning, I was talking with a friend and he mentioned this other dude I went to high school with younger brother had died in a car accident a couple weeks before. Later that day I pull out a slip of paper with this other dude's number and name on it from my pants. I vaguely remember running into him a year or so before this at a club where he gave me his number. I swear I had worn and washed these jeans at least a dozen times since I had run into this dude. I still makes no sense how that paper was there and I only found it then. I called the dude and we talked a bunch. It really helped me deal with the situation. I was walking my dog and I was almost to the driveway when I looked down for some reason and I looked back up and I ended up being back at the road about 6 blocks away from where I thought I was. I was so confused, but my dog looked completely fine. FYI, I don't drink or do drugs. I'm still pretty young. I had just pulled into the parking lot of where I worked and was walking towards the building. It was like 3 in the afternoon. Broad daylight. All of a sudden, I heard an ambulance's siren start sounding. Naturally, I look down the road to try and see the ambulance. I see it approaching and decided to watch it for a bit. It was quickly getting closer and it was about to pass right by me. However, there was a large SUV waiting to turn out of the parking lot and onto the road, blocking a few meters of the road from my view. The ambulance passed behind the SUV, probably about 50 feet away from me at most, and I vividly remember the siren becoming completely silent in that instant. The ambulance had vanished entirely as it passed behind that SUV. I was so confused. The road did not have many cars on it at the time, and it was broad daylight. I did a triple take and made sure that I didn't just miss it. I had a clear view of the road going both directions, and there was no more ambulance to be seen. No more siren either. I walked up and down the road, trying to find it for a solid minute, but nope, it was gone. I was well rested, not on drugs, and I didn't have a history of hallucinations. It seems dismissible, but I was completely aware of what happened, and I can't explain it to this day. My wife passed away a year ago today. Had some odd things happen, like a couple of old meaningful pictures show up that I swore were in storage. The strangest one was I vacuumed the carpet, and as soon as I was done, a diamond ring was on the ground right where I had just cleaned. It was like she was saying, hey, this one is real, don't lose it. When I was living with my parents, my dad was cleaning out one of his drawers and found a piece of paper with a postcode for a nearby city on. When he showed me, I immediately recognized it as my own handwriting, except I have no memory of ever writing out this postcode. So I punched the postcode into maps to find it as a random street I have never visited before, and I have no reason to visit it. I wish I had gone. Maybe the universe was trying to show me something. Around 12 years old, I was watching Megas XLR, or something that was on at the time. Sitting there, I noticed that the sun just turned off, like completely. I was real confused. Opened the blinds, and it was dark. Show was still at the same spot, but the clock on the cable box said it was 5 hours later. My best guess for what happened was that I passed out without realizing it. Like those nights where you lay in bed and blink and suddenly it's morning. So I'm guessing I fell asleep sitting up for exactly enough time to have Cartoon Network play a rerun of the show get to the exact spot I fell asleep at. Was surreal though. I think you just fell into a light sleep. Sometimes when I'm in the passenger seat of a car on a long drive, I'll fall asleep listening to the radio. When I wake up, it feels like I didn't even sleep, and I can remember everything that was on the radio. But the other person in the car is certain I sleep. Carrot, I snore. I've told this story before and could go into a ton of detail, but here's the short version. I'm 100% sure I vividly remember a dog that apparently doesn't exist. When I was 16, we lived on the other side of the province and my uncle had this little Jack Russell named Crew. Crew went missing for several months and then turned up at a humane society over an hour away, and we were all shocked this little dog has made it so far. Anyway, that was almost 20 years ago, and the other day I was talking to my parents and was like, whenever I hear about Jack Russells I think about Crew and that stunt he pulled, and they had no idea what I was talking about. Insisted my uncle had never had such a dog. I must have dreamed it, etc. Honestly, anyone else who would have remembered this dog has been dead for a long time, and I don't even have any pictures of my uncle. I have absolutely no way to prove this dog existed, but I'm sure that he did. They may have just forgotten. My parents are like this as well. Not that long ago I was telling them about a letter I had written to my dad while he was away a few years ago. They both insisted I must have dreamt it, but I found it not long after. Sometimes people can be forgetful. It doesn't necessarily mean Crew didn't exist. Close bracket. I was working on my motorcycle in a dirt lot where I had crashed it trying to do a sick drift, breaking off the clutch lever and the gear shifter. I had brought a wrench set with me and I was using one of them to take off a bolt when I put it down on the ground to finish unscrewing the bolt with my hand. 2 minutes later I went to pick it back up and it was gone. I ran all around this dirt lot looking for it to no avail. Luckily I had a spare in the car. Fixed the bike and drove back to my apartment to shower as I was filthy. I walked in my room and sitting on my desk was the wrench. I was dumbfounded. I remember driving my car to this intersection in this rural area and I'm checking both sides because of terrible blind spots. In the corner of my eye my mother is sitting there and says something like it's all clear my way. I look back and she isn't there. My mother had been dead for a few years at this point. This was also in the middle of the day and I've never had it happen since. Edit. Wow, my first award. Thanks. I was reading Kurt Vonnegut's last book, Timequake, and had put it in my backpack to read. While on the bus, I left the house, and for some reason about a block later I thought to myself, did I put the book in my bag? I looked and it wasn't there. Went back to the house and couldn't find it. Retraced my steps to where I turned around, and it was nowhere to be found. I never found the book again, and gave up on trying to get another copy. I think it was Vonnegut's way of telling me it wasn't worth a read. Well, my story is a bit creepy cause I lost myself. This was like 7 years ago when I was still in high school. It was a normal day, all classes went well till the math class began. The teacher was explaining the lesson and how it was related to the previous lesson we had the previous day. Everything the teacher was explaining was new to me and never heard before. So I was like, yeah sure, I wasn't paying attention again during that class. So I opened my notebook to check what I wrote about that class. I always write everything discussed during math class cause I sucked at math and my dad was strict about it, which got my teacher to be strict also with me, and found nothing about the previous class. I asked my friend sitting next to me to give me his notebook to make sure, and I found like a whole new material from the last class that I've never seen before. So I started investigating after the class, going around asking my classmates this crazy question: was I here yesterday during the math class? And they were like, what? And I explained the whole thing to them, and apparently I was not there. I attended both classes before and after the math class and wrote everything of both classes in my notebook, but I have no memory where I was during the math class. And the schools where I live have a one-class system where students stay in their class and teachers come to them for the lecture, then leave and the next subject's teacher comes, and so on. So we know each other well, and everybody I asked said that I wasn't there during the math class. So yeah, I lost myself for approximately an hour. My friend Sarah was in a nightclub, drunk off her face, when she got an overwhelming urge to tell a total stranger that her leg hurts. Edit. It didn't. All a bit strange. She ignores it but it doesn't stop. So she walks up to this guy and says, "I know this is crazy, but I've got a huge urge to tell you my leg hurts." I know that's crazy. Again. Sorry. But he bursts into tears. Turns out his dad had just died, and they made a pact before that if there was an afterlife he would get a message to him saying a totally random phrase, so there could be no mistakes, which they decided was "I've hurt my leg." When the song The Final Countdown was released in the 80s, I already knew it. It was brand new, just released, but I knew the tune and the words and could sing the whole thing beginning to end. I believed for a while that it was a cover version, but it wasn't. It isn't creepy, but when I was in high school I had a dream I was in all white classroom, totally white, like the ones you would see in a dream, and a girl was sitting in the chair on my side. During the dream, I knew it was a dream because that girl was a senior. We didn't have common classes. About 6 years later, I was at a master class. The sun was shining bright outside. The classroom was very illuminated, and I see this girl on my side. We are doing masters together and having a class in all white ducking classroom. Of course I remembered the dream at that very moment. Edit. Woo 6k upvotes guys. Question mark. Edit 2. My first award. Thanks. Exclamation mark. So this has always bothered me. I was 13 years old at the time and my dad was a coal miner. He worked third shift, known as the hoot owl shift, which was midnight to noon. As such he got home around 2 p.m. and slept till around 9. Got up, had dinner with us, and left for work. My dad was always pretty gruff and constantly yelled at us if my younger brother or I made too much noise and woke him up after getting home from somewhere, which as an adult now I completely understand. So one day I did something to wake him up. I forget what. Anyways he calls me back to the bedroom and I'm expecting to get a dressing down, but he just looked at me and said, "It's okay. Come over here and give me a hug." What 13-year-old boy wants to hug their dad? I kinda squirmed a bit and he followed up with, "What if something happened to me?" and just laid there all grizzled and tired. I didn't hug him. That night there was an accident in the mine. He saved everyone on his crew, including the one person he went back in for. His was the only death, and I'm convinced he knew it was gonna happen. I'll never forget his eyes that day. If someone asked you for a hug, give it to them. I love you, Dad. Edit. My very first gold. I'm so glad this resonated with someone. Second edit. This obviously resonated with more than one person. Words can't express how much I appreciate it. Thank you to everyone that shared their own stories of loss. I'm trying to read them all. If I miss one, I'm sorry. Thank you for sharing your story. My grandfather was a railroad worker. He and my grandmother lived within a close walk of the rail yard. My grandmother said one day that he said she should not leave his dinner out, like she did every night. He walked to the end of their sidewalk, then stopped and took a long look at her. She says it felt like he was truly taking her in. Looked her head to toe. He dropped dead less than an hour later at work. Stood up to throw away an orange peel and just fell over. Dead before he hit the ground. My grandmother is convinced he knew that would be the last time he saw her. I've told this on Reddit before, but here it is. I had a very important document that I only ever kept in one place. I kept it in the top drawer of a small filing cabinet. I never moved it and would always see it in that drawer whenever I opened it for whatever reason. The day came that I needed it now, and I didn't sweat it because I knew exactly where it was. Well, I'd be damned if it wasn't there. Cue panic attack. I tore that filing cabinet up. I removed everything and spread it out. Flipped papers over. Dug through envelopes. Shook everything out. Shined a flashlight all through the emptied cabinet in case it was somehow stuck to the sides. I mean, it was not there. I can assure you no one took it or was messing with me. I was so frustrated. I even looked through other parts of my house, but I knew it wouldn't be in any of those places, and it wasn't. I was intermittently going back to that dumb filing cabinet. No luck. Super irritated. I searched the rest of the house again, and on my way back downstairs where my filing cabinet was, I called out in frustration, "Okay, bring it back!" Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. I don't know who I thought I was talking to because I was alone. But you guessed it. I found it in the top drawer of my filing cabinet, where it should have been in the first place. I was relieved and totally freaked out. Edit. Thanks for the silver. Edit. Thanks for the gold. I called out in frustration. Okay. Bring it back. Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. On numerous occasions I've done something similar. When I can't find something, even after looking for a long time in the place or places where it should be, I usually say something like, I don't mind that you borrowed it, but I need it back now. Please put it in the next place I look. Apostrophe. Oddly, this works more often than not. I don't think it's anything supernatural, but I don't mind hedging my bets either. Most likely, it's the act of pausing and taking my mind off the search for a moment that does the trick. I've done that too. I was reading a book, set it down on the nightstand, and it was gone the next morning. I tore my room apart looking for it. No dice. So I say, come on now. I was reading that. Can I have it back? When you're done. 2 weeks later the book's back on the nightstand. Thanks for returning it. Hope you liked it. Apostrophe. I'm of the Ferris took it school. Probably going to get buried. But I met someone who no longer seems to exist. In October 2018. I developed tendonitis in my hand. So I went to see a hand specialist at my regular hospital. I remember the hand specialist really clearly. She was a really happy, talkative Vietnamese woman with straight, dark brown hair and glasses. She had a German sounding last name, which I assumed was her married name. She was really nice, and we had a long conversation about a medical conference that she goes to. She explained that my hand issues, caused by phone usage, were the hot topic of the conference, and that she'd probably use my injury as an example when she goes there. Anyway, she gave me care instructions and sent me home. I was told to return if it didn't resolve in a few weeks, because then I'd need to be re-examined and sent to physical therapy. It didn't resolve, and I went back. I had an appointment with the same doctor, but the woman who came into the room was completely different. She was a white woman with light brown hair, no glasses, completely different face shape, really dull and unwelcoming disposition. I was so ducking confused. I asked her name, and she gave the same name the Asian doctor had. I asked if there was another doctor by that name, and she told me no, it was only her. I described the doctor I had seen, and she got annoyed and said she didn't know who I was talking about. I later went online to the hospital staff directory and tried to find the Asian doctor. I couldn't. I have no idea what happened to her. I even checked my medical records to see if maybe I remembered her name incorrectly, but I didn't. Both of my visits have the same doctor's name on them. I've always been confused about this, and it really bothers me that I met someone who doesn't seem to exist anymore. Edit. Thanks for the silver and mind blown award. To answer some questions, I couldn't tell if the white doctor actually remembered me when I told her that I was confused about the situation. She just looked at my chart, confirmed that my previous appointment had been with her, and told me that she'd seen me before. I wasn't under the impression that she actually remembered me. I didn't ask a lot of questions because she seemed extremely annoyed with me, like I was wasting her time and she just wanted the appointment to be over. I'm sure that I sounded insane, so I don't blame her for her bad attitude. I don't think the Asian doctor ever told me the name of the conference. She just said that it was a conference for hand specialists, so I haven't been able to look it up. Also, someone asked me if I was intoxicated during the first visit. No, I wasn't. I don't drink or do drugs. A lot of people have said that it might have been a student/intern/resident or a physician's assistant. My hospital doesn't have students, except in the pharmacy, as far as I know, but I agree that it could have been a physician's assistant. I'm not 100% convinced, because I rechecked the hospital's directory of doctors just now, and even though PAs are listed, I still couldn't find the Asian doctor, but it's 2020, so maybe she doesn't work there anymore? Question mark. I also tried to describe the first doctor to the second one and she cut me off and told me she didn't know who I was talking about, but maybe she lied. Part of me thinks that this is like the Berenstein/Berestin thing, and at some point, I got switched from the Asian doctor reality to the white doctor reality. I always have weird visions or I'll see something in a dream, but I won't notice that I've seen it. Then like a week or so after I'll see the exact same thing. Almost like deja vu, but not quite, since it hasn't actually happened before. It would always be something so specific, and it has happened multiple times, so it can't just be a strange coincidence. Edit. It's very reassuring to see all the stories of people experiencing the same thing. Assures me that I'm not going insane. Or maybe many others are just going insane with me. I won't be able to read them all as my phone's been blown up with them, but I'll try my best. Taking the trash out at night. Super remote area, so I know for a fact we're the only ones around here. Getting close to the road and I hear very clearly "help me" from a female voice. Even knowing there's such a slim chance of there being another living person around, I still feel like I should look around and check it out in case I wasn't just hearing things and someone actually needs help. Take about 2 steps in the direction I thought I heard it. Hear a giggle in the same exact voice. Turn around and walk promptly back up the driveway, because duck that shit. Anyone who actually needed help wouldn't be laughing. I don't think. I have a good one. I was about 12 years old and woke up in the middle of the night needing to take a leak. I walked across the hall to the little bathroom, hit the lights, and was about to reach for the toilet when I glanced up and saw a face in the mirror. It was not my face. It was as if someone was on the other side, standing to the right, with their face right next to the glass, staring at me. I only saw it for the briefest moment, but it is seared into my brain. I screamed and ran out of there to find my dad. Of course, my dad investigated, then calmed me down, or tried to. Eventually we had a prayer session, because I was so freaked out. Eventually I must have gone back to sleep. Fast forward to my 30s. I'd forgotten all about the event. One night while visiting, my dad quietly brings it up. Remember that one time you saw a face in the mirror? It suddenly came back to me in a rush of memory, sending a chill down my spine. Yay, I remember. Well, he said, I sometimes think about that night. He looked down at the floor with a serious expression. I saw it too. He went on to describe exactly what he'd seen. We have no idea what that was. Apparently when he investigated, he saw it and had a freak out of his own. Apparently the prayer session was as much for his own nerves as mine. I respect him for keeping that tidbit from me till my 30s, but I kinda wish he'd never told me. So, this might be hard to explain. I was probably 12 and lived in a big log cabin. One day while my parents were at work, I got in a fight with my brother, 18, who had some anger issues. He chased me through the house and I ran out one door, around our porch, and in through another door. I was going to lock it behind me, but didn't have time because he was too close behind me. So, I slammed the door behind me and kept running. When I glanced back to see if he had made it through the door yet, he was banging on the window of said door and yelling for me to unlock it. The door was locked, and there was no he had locked it, because the door could only be locked from the outside with a key, of course. And our parents never gave us keys. There was also no way the door could have accidentally locked when I slammed it behind me, because it needed to be fully turned to lock, and usually required some finagling at the end to make it actually lock. I stood there dumbfounded for a few seconds, and then ran to a bathroom and locked myself in there. Definitely feel that saved me that day. Edit. The door only had a deadbolt, which could only be locked from the outside with a key. But from the inside you had to turn the knob. Suppose I worded that in a confusing way. This didn't happen to me, but to my mother and aunt when they were younger, and to this day is the creepiest thing I've ever heard. So one day, when they were around 16 years old, they were alone in the house for a couple of hours while their mother was out working. I don't remember exactly which one of them noticed this, but one of them walked into the kitchen and was shocked to find that the stove had somehow been ripped open all the way into the oven. My mother described it as if someone had stabbed the top of the oven, slashed it, and then pulled that slash open with their hands. Both of them saw it, and when I asked my aunt about this story she gave me the same description. Also, This was definitely not a visual hallucination because they swear they reached with their hand from inside the oven to the top through the hole. They both swear they were sober at the time, and I believe them because they were raised in an extremely religious environment, so it's impossible they were drunk or high. When my grandmother got home they naturally went to show her the slash, only to find it was completely gone. The stove was completely normal and there was no sign of a hole ever being there. This experience is probably the only reason why I'm not completely skeptical about the supernatural. I've got other personal experiences of this sort, but they all can be explained rationally one way or another in a way that makes complete sense. But this story is way beyond me. I was a young boy of 5 to 6, I think, maybe 7, at summer camp. The supervisors took the kids to a swimming pool and we were all swimming there. One of the supervisors was throwing kids into the pool. We'd splash around, climb out, and get tossed in again, which was great fun. It was my turn to get thrown in. Except I forgot to take a breath before I hit the water and went under pretty deep. Now I was underwater and I really had to take a breath and was fighting the urge to breathe. I lost and inhaled. I swear to ducking God, I'm not making this up, but I somehow breathed air. I felt calmer and my lungs and body relaxed, just like I had taken a gulp of fresh air. I swam around underwater for a bit, just because it was so weird. But then I had the thought that maybe I shouldn't test or take for granted this thing that just happened. I should just count my blessings. So I went up and surfaced. The rest of the day was normal and I never told anybody. I should mention that as a very young child, aged 2 to 4, that I hallucinated a few times. Once I was walking down a hall in my house and I started floating in midair. If I thought about it or questioned it, I'd start sinking. But if I just relaxed and accepted it, I could float again. That only happened to me once. But I would have dreams where the same dynamic would happen for many years. Those stopped around the time I hit puberty, I think. Anyway, I don't know what happened that day in the pool. My first thought at the time was that it was another hallucination. But the part one don't understand is why I so desperately needed to breathe before the hallucination happened. And why I was so relaxed and calm and not panicky, as if I had actually breathed afterward. I even stayed underwater for a bit. It was pretty surreal. I've posted about this experience a few times now. About 2 years ago I was driving up a short hill in the overtaking lane. I was attempting to overtake a particularly slow car. I was going far too fast. I absolutely knew this, but was somehow fine with it. Then I had a burst of adrenaline and decided to accelerate even harder to overtake the car before the overtaking lane merged back into one lane. Sometimes I don't think I was successful. I think after I crested the hill I was two abreast in the now single lane. A truck was in the opposite lane starting to come up to the hill and I think I hit it at the right hand side, the truck driver's left side, straight on, at considerable speed. I remember looking at the truck and thinking I'm going to hit it, but feeling that that's okay. Everything is going to be fine. I think I saw the front of the truck hit and crumple the left side of my car. Saw it come right up to my face then. For a second, nothing but black. A moment later I was parked by a small factory type building about half a mile down the road. I remember my skin feeling prickly and tingly, and I felt the adrenaline wash out of my body. I cut my journey short and just went home. Now, on occasion things just feel left of center. The world just feels a little more grey and cold, and I mean that literally and figuratively. My family and friends seem absolutely the same, and I'm very happy in my life, but some things in the world just seem off. This seems absolutely ridiculous to say, but sometimes I'll be in a place and I'll get an odd, uncomfortable feeling and then the place seems to flash to warmth and sunlight and happiness. It then goes back to this slightly off, grayer place. I see the same physical place, but for a while it seems much more beautiful. I'll read an article or listen to the radio and I'll think that that's not how it's supposed to be. So I'll Google it, and sure enough I was wrong. It's not all the time, and it doesn't worry me. As I said, my personal life is the same and I'm happy. It's the outside world that sometimes feels so often so wrong. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.